ठीक है
वही फाइनल है
ठीक है
प्रणव जी गुड आफ्टरनून
रंजीत जी So good afternoon everyone and welcome to this important webinar on how to create an ecosystem for process safety and loss prevention, and we are extremely grateful to have with us esteemed panelist with us today, Dr. Jan Rohr-Bakke, Director Global Business Development, Jetson and Adjunct Professor Technical Safety, University of Norway. And we are grateful to have with us today Dr. J.P. Gupta ji, Chairman, Environment Committee of the PhD Chamber and Committee on Environment Clearances, Ministry of Environment and Forest. And I'm extremely grateful to have with us today Dr. Ranjit Mehta. Dr. Mehta is Principal Director in the PhD Chamber with over 3 decades of experience in various leadership sectors, spread across various sectors, energy, hydrocarbons, MSME, logistic, extra. And I am extremely grateful to have with us today Dr. J.S. Sharma ji, Co-Chairman, Environment Committee, who has been a great support to the committee, and of course Mr. Pranav Podar, Co-Chairman of the Environment Committee, and Mr. Rajendra Narkhade ji, he is Country Head India, Jetson, who has been a great support in getting connecting the dots in organizing this webinar today, and I am grateful to have you with us today. And now I would like to tell Dr. Mehta, our Principal Director, PhD Chamber, to kindly give the welcome remarks and start the proceedings for this afternoon.
Thank you, Kanchan. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Jan Rohr-Bakke, the Director, Global Business Development, Plexcon, Adjunct Professor of Technical Safety University of Stavanger, Norway. Thank you very much, Professor, indeed, for joining us today. Just let me begin with the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's a 115 years old organization. We have direct and indirect membership of more than 130,000 companies, and we work on around more than 55 verticals of Indian economy. And one of them is, of course, environment. Since environment is extremely important, that is why it is chaired by none other than Dr. J.P. Gupta, who is a very distinguished scientist himself, and also on very important panels of Government of India, which decide on environmental impact assessment on various industries. And also ably supported by our Dr. J.S. Sharma, who is the co-chair of our Environment Committee, and he has a very illustrious career working with the PSUs, public sector undertakings in Government of India, and also in various other streams. And also we have co-chairman Mr. Pranav Podar, who runs a company which works on environmental safety and assessment, and all other very distinguished participants. It's a great pleasure because since process safety is extremely important part, and though we have experts today who will talk on this, but it's a very disciplined framework for managing the integrity of operating systems and processes that handle hazardous substances. It relies on good design principles, engineering and operating and maintenance practices, basically to avoid the flow of these dangerous substances into the environment. We use the process safety. It's extremely relevant and contemporary topic which is required in all the industries today. And we are very thankful for Dr. J.P. Gupta, the chairman of our committee, who more often than not, he comes out extremely relevant topics, and this topic also has been decided by him, and it is extremely relevant so that all the industries can learn from our very distinguished panelists who are here today. And thank you very much. I welcome you all once again. And we are here to listen to the distinguished speakers who are for today. With this, I request Dr. J.P. Gupta, the chairman of our environment committee, to give the industry perspective for today and add value to the knowledge of each and every participant who is here, who has logged in to hear you, sir. Over to you, Dr. Gupta. Please unmute yourself, Dr. Gupta. Sir, unmute कर लीजिए, Dr. Gupta. हाँ, बस ठीक है. Now we can hear you.
Good afternoon to all of you, and I am delighted to talk on broadly on the process safety. And before that, I am dedicating this talk to those who lost life or injured in chemical industry. I am dedicating my talk to them. In the backdrop of frequent accident with loss of pressure life, process safety I acquired needed attention of policymakers, regulators, industry, and public. I am reminded of a Shakespeare novel. There, in what was true for murder in Macbeth, Solitude holds true for process safety. We have to act now. We have to act now. Process safety is not a goal. It is not a goal, but it is a journey on the path of spirituality. And you can ask why? Because to save others' life. Therefore, I truly think that process safety is a journey on the path of spirituality to save others' life. With these few words, I would like to talk on I will request you, you can go on showing my presentation on the screen and you are controlling it. Okay, Mr. Mehta?
Okay. Devika, can you kindly share the presentation of Dr. Gupta? Make it on a presentation mode, please.
In fact, it took me quite a while to select the name for the process safety, because on one side, you agree that process safety is not a goal, it is a journey. And after a lot of thinking, I could find a suitable title, needed an ecosystem to nurture safer India. Because safety almost like a soul. If safety is gone, your entire thing crumbles. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to talk a little bit. You will appreciate that all chemicals, starting from oil and gas, petrochemicals, fertilizer, organic chemical, inorganic chemical, biochemical, they have become almost indispensable part of our life. No human being can live without chemicals. And to meet the demand of the growing population, these chemicals are growing. And now if the demand is growing, you need mega size of the plants, from the refineries, from the petrochemicals. And when the size of the plants are very big, you need the complex technologies, catalyst with selectivity and sensitivity, all kind of complicated operations, all kind of complicated controls. According to me, all these chemical plants are almost like mini nuclear reactors. And with this kind of thing, you are living in a very, very risky environment. And any kind of negligence can be catastrophic to the entire society and to the plant and to the neighbor. You will appreciate The GDP of any country is dependent on the accident. Accident take place, you loss of human life, there is a damage to the environment you cannot think of. You know about the Bhopal tragedy. The people up to 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers got affected. And not only that, the entire environment in the area got affected. The reputation of the firm like Union Carbide, a multinational company, disappeared from this planet. Tarnish, if there are frequent accidents or even a mega accident, the image of the country, you tarnish the image. More than that, the accident taking place in any factory create a lot of fear psychosis. And this fear psychosis is not remaining within the factory, but in the surrounding areas as well. Now, society, NGOs are becoming less tolerant to avoidable accidents. Therefore, the NGT and all come into the picture, and immediately these kind of operations are stopped, and the directors and owners of the company are put behind bars. Next slide, please. In the previous slide, I mentioned that we need chemicals and the impact of any accident, what happens. Now I will give you a little bit of historical background. India recorded 1.6 million fires and around 28,000 deaths, which appear in the BME Jury International Prevention Journal. Indian death rate are almost 2.5 times than in China. Process safety needs, educational institute, industries, regulators, and government has to join hands together and to work together so that the accident could be prevented. Center of excellence. This is a concept where the industries, education institute, regulators, and public, as a matter of fact, public challenge all of them. And by doing that, you are creating center of excellence, and I call this center of excellence as temple of knowledge. And this temple of knowledge yesterday has been set up, inaugurated, or a curtain raiser by one of the largest agrochemical, fifth largest agrochemical company in India, UPL. It is a matter of great pride for Indians, and particularly in India, and particularly the support of Jaxcon and Mr. Jen Rowan, this dream has come true. Now the most important thing, corporate governance. Now, corporate governance in all corporates are regulated by company law and SEBI. Unfortunately, corporate governance is not being regulated by any regulatory agency. India has to go a long way in process safety to adopt advanced latest technique and develop R&D activities. Training through virtual reality is needed. Industrial towns, sensitive ecological zones around industry and installation. We do not have industrial zones separately than the inhabitant. Though industries were planned, habitants never planned and need attention. Ecosystem in the process safety is missing and need constant nurturing. Next slide, please. Now, on one side, I've given you a little picture of India, where we are today. And on the other side, I'm going to show you globally what is happening. Continuous research to have inherent, safe, and reliable to ensure accidents do not take place. In case accidents occur, minimize damage by effective training to virtual reality to firefighters, employees, and disaster management. Globally, advanced 3D models are used to assess risk, and virtual reality is used to create scenarios for training. Industry, government, institute working together, developing center of excellence like Mary Connors in United States and several in all advanced countries. Corporate governance in process safety, they call a concept from the boardroom to the front line. It means the entire process safety starting from the top position to the front line to the front line worker. Process safety given the topmost priority in all activity to create a strong ecosystem for sustainable development. Next slide, please. Fortunately, we have got all regulations. You talk anything, it is available, like Oil Industry Safety Directorate, Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board, Indian Petroleum Act, Explosive Rule, Indian Oil Regulation Code, Factory Act, Bureau of Indian Standards, EP Act, Public Liability Insurance, National Green Tribunal, Disaster Management, and Environmental Protection. The beauty lies, question arises with all these kind of regulatory bodies, why these frequent accidents are taking place. Something needs to be done. You cannot allow these kind of precious lives are being lost, and we read in the newspaper for a few days, and after that we totally forget. Next slide, please. Though Government of India, I am not going to talk much about these few slides because it's too elaborate subject to talk, but I will tell you, Government of India has recently issued guidelines to all the ministries to prepare effective disaster management plan to all ministries. Second point, NDMA, National Disaster Management Agency, has been assigned the job to prepare a national plan. And Ministry of Environment has been assigned the job to make the risk-free, where all the chemical industry toxicity and LD50 and all will be taken care. With this kind of thing, we do think that something will take place, but as a chemical engineer and working in industry, India needs chemical safety board. Without this, because safety of other industries are different than safety of the chemical industry. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, I have just touched upon Center of Excellence. What is the Center of Excellence? Center of Excellence is that educational institute, industry, and regulatory authorities, they come together. Regulatory authorities are being given the knowledge of the Center of Excellence, what are the latest regulations, and these regulations should be pertinent to the Indian condition. I would like to tell you the scope of Center of Excellence. It will promote education, research, and support industry and regulatory authorities, offer services to industry in process safety studies, work during process from the initial stage, like Engineers India and other companies, they work on the process design. Center of Excellence will interact with them to provide specialized knowledge on process safety, how to make the plant inherently safe. Next slide, please. Support regulatory authority to keep abreast with evolving international development. Virtual training to industries and national disaster management force. Center of Excellence will support NDMA to develop national strategy based on global best practices and VR training. COE will also offer master's and PhD program. Basic research, support industry-sponsored projects. COE will document and investigate all chemical accidents. Forensic and audit of higher learning will be undertaken by COE. Today in our country, we do not have experts doing a forensic audit after the accident. Insurance companies, they do not know whether the plant is safe or not. Just they quote the insurance, without knowing the safety, inbuilt safety in the plant. Therefore, Center of Excellence can evaluate the plant and recommend that this plant is inherently safe. Litigation in the courts. You need the expert. There is no expert in our country. Satellite mapping of all industrial clusters. Unfortunately, our industry are all spread, and even in Delhi, even in the locality where all the VIP stay. Therefore, it is a must to have the mapping of the entire country, and this mapping should be given to NDMA, National Disaster Management Board, so that they know well in advance what kind of industry are operating in the country. For last, it is a very important point. Formulate guidelines for corporate governance in process safety for MSME and large industries. It is a must. No one has touched the important point. Next slide, please. Now I've been talking about corporate governance. Like Center of Excellence will formulate guidelines for MSME and to large scale for the boardroom to the frontline concept. And this concept will be similar to OECD, which is and American Chemistry Council corporate care. And these guidelines should be regulated. And just for example, in every company in the boardroom, there has to be a director responsible for process safety. In true sense, maybe some people may be assigned even in the bank board, but do they have the competency? The most important question is asked, the people who are representing process safety, do they have the competency? And then are they accountable for? And these regulatory guidelines will make them to have the competency as well as the accountability. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to end up. What should be action plan? I have discussed all the things what is happening, but I have to recommend something. What should be the vision for the country? We need introduction of master's program in process safety in all engineering institutes in the country. It is a must and need of the hour. Need at least 1 lakh process safety engineers and scientists in the country. These will create the ecosystem in the country. Now, capsule courses in process safety should be mandatory for decision makers and board of directors in corporate. Setting up Center of Excellence in each state in India. Center of Excellence will create pool of talent and masters and PhD students. Guidelines for corporate governance in process safety should be introduced at the earliest possible. Litigation should be at par with the international litigation with strict compliance. Responsibility and accountability of regulatory bodies. In India, there is no accountability of regulatory bodies. If accident takes place, I have seen within the factory where accident has taken place, only junior level people are punished, or 1 or 2 officers at the junior level in the regulatory punished. No, the highest level person should be made accountable for the accident. Safety audit after every 4 years, and safety audit should not only cover their safety area but entire surrounding. Next slide, please. Now, in the conclusion, these are the conclusions which I made it for the Center of Excellence yesterday, but it is very relevant. Some may see UPL strict Center of Excellence is a small step, but I envision this is a giant leap to nurture ecosystem in process safety for safer India. And then I've been thinking, what should be a concluding quote? and I drafted this quote. We have many geniuses in process safety, but we need the ecosystem to nurture ingenuity now. And next one, then I asked question from myself, can necessity not be just the mother of invention, but beget an ecosystem of innovation in process safety? With these few words, I'm concluding my talk, and this talk is dedicated to those who lost their lives. And now you are going to hear the words of wisdom, pulse of wisdom from Jen Rover. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta, for your very delightful, illuminous presentation that you made today for the benefit of all the participants, and very nice of you for having dedicated it to the people who have been affected by the mismanagement in process safety, and especially you reminded of the Union Carbide accident, Bhopal gas tragedy on 2nd December 1984, where more than 500,000 people had lost their lives. And it is with this, ladies and gentlemen, you can just imagine that how important it is to create an ecosystem for the process safety management in our country. And Dr. Gupta has also suggested that it should be included in postgraduate degree courses in many universities. Maybe some of the universities are already, they have already started it. And a center of excellence has been opened by UPL. That's a very good idea. In fact, the suggestion which you made that every MSME and large organizations should have the corporate governance on process safety is a very unique idea that will help. And we can also, as a chamber, give the recommendations to the ministries to incorporate it in their guidelines.
Excellent.
And, yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for this very descriptive and informative presentation that you have given. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very distinguished professor, Dr. Jan Roar Bakke from Norway. And Professor, you are most welcome to give your presentation. We all are looking forward to. We had some chats that where they were saying that make it on presentation mode, but sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we could not do it. There was some technical glitch. That is why it was shown on this mode. Thank you. Over to Professor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ranjit. You can hear me now?
Yes.
That's good. Can you show my presentation?
Yeah, Devika, please start the presentation of the professor. Yeah.
Okay, now this is in presentation mode. That's good.
Yes, it is.
Okay. I would like to extend my sincere thanks for being invited to participate in this webinar on creating an ecosystem for process safety and loss prevention. My dear brother, Dr. Gupta, has set the scene now, and I will try to make some small contribution, some additional contribution also to it. But the framework is actually now, has actually now been set by Dr. Gupta. Next slide, please. My company, Gexcon, I will not spend a lot of time on talking about that, but a little information could be useful. We have been active in process safety, research and development, and consulting since the late 1970s. In the last 10 years or so, we have established ourselves in different places around the world, including India. We have now 2 offices in India, one in Navi Mumbai and one in Pune. We have also, the last couple of years, been fortunate enough to set up memorandums of understanding with IIT Delhi, with ICT, and also with UPL. And as you've heard from Dr. Gupta, the first, and I would say unique, center of excellence at least unique so far, in India for process safety has been set up at SRICT with Gexcon as a knowledge partner. I would like to stress some of the issues that were brought up by Dr. Gupta also. Sharing of process safety knowledge is paramount. If one company has a major accident, which is what process safety is about, to avoid major accidents, then it will impact on the whole industry. It will impact on our permit to operate, and it will impact on society's perception of this industry. So we cannot keep to ourselves. We have to share what we know about process safety. Major accidents, they happen, well, we think they happen rarely, but actually around the world they happen maybe once a week, but rarely compared to other smaller accidents like slips and trips and so on. The focus of the Center of Excellence has again been described by Dr. Gupta, but it is very, very briefly to learn from existing knowledge, to develop it further, then implement, make sure that the knowledge is utilized so that we get a safer industry. This is not cheap. It will not be inexpensive, and it must be continuously driven by top management in companies, and it must be supported by authorities. To ensure success, we have to involve the relevant stakeholders. And in my country, we have a so-called tripartite function. The excuse me, the authorities are involved, the industry, the companies are involved, and the workers' representatives are involved also. It is, after all, their lives that are at stake. These need to be involved also in guiding, I think, the future of the center or centers of excellence. And of course, research and teaching institutions are very important. As Dr. Gupta mentioned, maybe you need 100,000 or a lakh process safety engineers in India. Up until 2016, I worked a few years, 7 years, for the Norwegian state oil company, now called Equinor. And in my company, we had probably around 200 process safety engineers in one company, in one oil company. It is not a big number, but they were there in all operations, in research and development, and in projects. They all had their roles and they participated. So several hundred were in such a company. Towards the end of my presentation, I will give you some examples, if time permits, of learnings. One is to look at the Bunsfield accident and what we learned from that one. And the other one is to exemplify, I would say, what we did in this International Association of Oil and Gas Producers, formerly OGP, now IOGP. There was a committee, the Process Safety Subcommittee, that was formed in 2012, where the focus was on major accident key performance indicators. How could we produce information that would tell us whether a major accident was potentially a problem or could occur or not? At this time, I was in Statoil, or Equinor as it is now called, and I was given the task of chairing this process safety subcommittee from 2012, when it was started, until I left Equinor or Statoil to go to Gexcon in 2016. Next slide, please. I will not go into detail about this. It is a bit too small to read, and there is a lot of information there, but I will mention a couple of things. You can see our global setup on the lower left there, seeing also that we have offices in India as well as in other parts of the world, including China, Indonesia, Australia, Russia, Norway, Netherlands, France, Sweden, UK, and the US. Our work is based on, or our position, I would say, is based on nearly 50 years of research and development and innovation. The precursor of GEXCON started in the 1970s, looking into and doing research on dust explosions, and then it continued. Since then, we have invested almost $100 million on the development. Since 1980, GEXCON has performed 162 research and development projects of different sizes, some of them quite big. And we have published 422 papers, as far as I can see, also around this work. So, as you can see, it started out as research, but then as our research matured and our knowledge increased and our tools became more and more useful, then we started to do consulting work as well, which I think was very fortunate in a sense, because from consulting, from interacting with industry, we learn what are the problems being faced by industry, so we can use it to shape our further focus on research and development. So it is a very, very useful combination, and that is one that I think also should be looked into and used at the centers of excellence, because you need to understand what the industrial problems are. And that you can do by actually looking into the real safety issues. Next slide, please. As I mentioned already, we have research and development in GEXCON, we have consulting in GEXCON, and we have what we call test, or our experimental facilities in GEXCON. We have 2 large-scale test facilities doing different kinds of experiments, like fires, explosions, releases or leaks into atmosphere, and measuring physical parameters, which we then use to develop our software. Okay, next one, please. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong. Can you go back one? Yes, thank you. I have mentioned the Flex software already. It is a simulation tool. We use it to calculate the effects of releases, the spreading of gases and dusts, ignition. Well, actually, we can look into toxicity as well. We can look into ignition, and we can do fire and explosion analysis to demonstrate consequences of such leaks. Next one, please. This is a video. It is an example of a use of flax for chlorine dispersion. And you see that we have here a 3-dimensional model of an urban area. If you can start the video, please. What you see here is different from the simple 2-dimensional calculation methods that are routinely used today in India and many other parts of the world. Yeah, can you go back to the presentation? Thank you. Yes, and no, please back. Yes, thank you. So in a flax analysis, we actually have to implement the geometry, the buildings, the structures, the pipework, everything that is localized in your calculation domain. And then that will influence on how for example, a chlorine gas, as we just saw, is spreading. If there is a building standing in the way of the cloud will go around it. If there is turbulence generated, and there is, because of the presence of the buildings and maybe also by wind, then that turbulence will influence on the mixing of the gas with air, and so that it will spread in a different way than if you don't take into account these structures, these buildings. And with a three-dimensional computational fluid dynamic software like FLAX, you can take that into account. You cannot really do that with a simpler two-dimensional calculation tools. Next one, please. We don't only have FLAX in GEXCON. We also have the simpler softwares, which in some cases are perfectly sufficient. They can be used, and they are very quick and cheap to use compared to the computational fluid dynamics software. Some of you may be familiar with the colored books from TNO. We in GEXCON actually took over the safety group of TNO 3 years ago. That included also the colored books and their software effects and risk curves. So now we have a GEXCON subsidiary in the Netherlands, which was formerly part of TNO, and which were the authors of the colored books and also of the software programs, effects and risk curves. Next, please. This is output from effects, which can, for example, be used to analyze dynamic behavior of dispersion again. As I mentioned, with FLAX, you have to spend some time and effort to get the more precise results, but with effects, you can get results quickly, cheaply, but not with the same degree of accuracy. Next one, please. This is a video, and I will ask that it is started shortly, but we were involved in the Bunsfield accident investigation. Bunsfield was a release of petrol in near London in the UK back in 2005, and they were actually having problems in determining the cause of what turned out to be an explosion in this petrol cloud that was formed. And our contribution there was actually to understand that it was the presence of trees along the roads surrounding the facility that led to flame acceleration and high overpressures, so that actually an explosion happened and not only a fire. Can you show the video, please? This has sound also.
The early morning of Sunday, 11th of December 2005, a large explosion occurred at the Bunsfield oil storage depot near Hemel Hempstead, Hertfordshire, followed by a huge fire. Fortunately, there were no fatalities, but 43 people were injured, and significant damage occurred to both commercial and residential properties in the vicinity. In January 2006, the Health and Safety Commission appointed 6 individuals representing the Bunsfield Major Incident Investigation Board to oversee the formal investigation into the Bunsfield accident, which was performed jointly by the Health and Safety Executive and the Environmental Agency. The investigation determined that a flammable cloud was formed by overfilling and spillage of some 300 tons of unleaded petrol from a big storage tank, which was subsequently ignited, resulting in the explosion. The third of 3 progress reports from the investigation board issued in May 2006 stated that the magnitude of the overpressures generated in the open areas of the Northgate and Fuji car parks is not consistent with current understanding of vapor cloud explosions. The investigation has so far been unable to establish why the ignition of the vapor cloud and the explosion propagation in the relatively uncongested environment of the adjacent car parks caused significant overpressures that produced the severe damage to property. It was at this stage that Gexcon were approached by Total Petrochemicals to assist in the investigation of the accident. As an initial task, Gexcon personnel performed a survey of the remains of the Bunsfield oil storage depot on June 29, 2006. This survey concluded that the congestion present in the tank farm was not sufficient to explain the high overpressures that had occurred. However, examination of the area rapidly led to the theory that the significant congestion formed by trees and undergrowth along two roads surrounding the site could be responsible for flame acceleration and high overpressures in the flammable cloud. Gexcon took this theory into the FLAX explosion and dispersion simulator. The oil depot and the surrounding suspect congested tree areas were modeled. Simulations of explosions of a large, shallow butane air cloud were performed, which showed that with trees included in the model, very high overpressures were generated. In some cases, more than 10 bar was seen locally, which is high enough to be consistent with the damage observed. Without trees, very low overpressures, typically of 0.1 bar or less, were seen. These results were presented to the Health and Safety Executive in May 2007. In September 2008, Gexcon carried out further physical explosion tests in undergrowth at a range in Norway, which also produced supporting results. Unobtainable information of gas cloud size, location, and composition prevented the simulation of a true representation of the actual explosion that took place. However, the simulations do show that the FLAX code, which has been developed for use in industrial areas and is widely recognized for its ability to produce realistic overpressures there, also produces realistic results when applied to the Bunsfield case. The work performed by Gexcon is not proof that the presence of the trees is the sole reason for the high overpressures. However, work presented in 2009 by the Fire and Blast Information Group supports Gexcon's conclusions that trees indeed played a significant role in the development of the explosion at Bunsfield.
Thank you. So, how were we able to actually determine the root cause of this accident? Excuse me, there are some people who are talking and not muted, so if they could mute, it would be useful. Then
please mute yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the reason why we were able to actually determine what had happened or understand what had happened was knowledge about the parameters that influence the course of explosions. If we didn't have that knowledge to understand that pipework or indeed tree branches can lead to turbulence generation in the flow of an explosion and thereby generation of overpressure, we would never have understood what was behind it. Okay, next slide, please. I mentioned initially that the IOGP has, back in 2012, they formed a process safety subcommittee, where the main focus were on major accident key performance indicators. And as I said, I chaired it till I left to go to Gexcon in 2016. By the way, there is an Indian company who's a member of IOGP. It's Cairn Energy, I think. What you see here is just the front page of some of the reports that were written by this subcommittee. When we started talking there about major accidents, then we very quickly started to talk about safety barriers, systems that are put in place to maybe hinder accidents from developing or control them. Everybody knew what a barrier was, but unfortunately nobody agreed. So what we understood was that in this committee we had representatives from about 20 of the largest oil and gas companies in the world. They were Shell, Mobil, Exxon, BP, Statoil, and so on. We all knew what was a barrier, but we didn't agree. So as you see on the top right there is a report called Standardization of Barrier Definitions. This report, when we realized that we actually didn't have a common view on what was a safety barrier, how to define it, then we started saying that, well, we need to actually make that definition so that IOGP has a common view of what is a safety barrier. And since you all are muted, you cannot contribute with your guesses to how long this took. But I will tell you, it took us 3 years from we identified that we really didn't agree till we actually came up with this report. So it takes a lot of time to get a common understanding and to get agreement on something. But now this report exists. It is a very good report. It is not applicable only to oil and gas, but I think to all industries. So I would recommend it as a good read. There is also another report there called Process Safety, Leading Key Performance Indicators, the second one on the right. That is also a very good report because you are familiar with performance indicators, lagging indicators that tells you something has happened basically, and the leading ones which tells you that something could happen. And this is a very good report focusing on those issues. Again, a good read, even though it is not from the chemical industry. Next slide, please. I will not go into this one in detail, but IOGP also developed an operating management system framework. I assume that you will be given access to my presentation here afterwards, so you can have a look there. And actually, all these reports that IOGP have produced, they can be downloaded for free from the IOGP website. So it is all there. Next slide, please. Barriers. I already mentioned barriers, but as we define it in IOGP, a risk control that seeks to prevent unintended events from occurring or prevent escalation of events into incidents with harmful consequences. Barriers can be demonstrated in different ways. You can use the bow tie model, which is an analysis of all potential threats, or the Swiss cheese model, which is an analysis of a single threat within the bow tie. Again, this is, I'm sure, known to many of you, so I'm not going into detail, but it can be described in the publications I have mentioned or in other publications also. Next, please. Part of our work in IOGP was to determine what are the right barrier types to focus on that will give us the best application of barriers. And we ended up saying that we had two. We had hardware barriers and we had human barriers. And then we had something that supported these two types of barriers, namely what we call management system elements. Again, this is described in detail in IOGP 544. I'm just pointing you to it now if this is something that you would like to know more about. Next, please. One of the things we did also in IOGP was to collect process safety events, information about the accidents or events that all member companies have had, and we then produce statistics every year based on this. So again, these statistics reports are published, openly published by IOGP. And what you see here is shown what we call tier 1 and tier 2 process safety events, where a tier 1 is usually a larger release and tier 2 is a smaller release. There are also other types of incidents included in those, but the release part, the leak part, is the main issue. So we could then see what the industry experienced from year to year in terms of accidents. One thing we did in addition to this was that after a few years, we started to require the companies who reported to provide verbal descriptions of the incidents, like a one-pager, where they actually talked about what had happened to give more insight and more background information. Now, we realized, and this was a big problem, we saw that reporting of incidents must be manageable. So we couldn't require too much, otherwise people just wouldn't do it because they didn't have time. So manageable reporting is important, but we saw that when we requested the different companies to verbally describe their biggest incidents, that gave us a lot of additional understanding that can really be useful. So that is something that I would like also to see in the Center of Excellence, that if they are able to, if the Center of Excellence that has been formed now is able to initiate collection of accident information, then there are some learnings to be made here on how to do it, what not to look at, and so on. So that we can get back to at a later stage. Next, please. An interesting thing, accident statistics per company. We also produced that. Now, this can be quite controversial in one way, but this curve was issued, or this graph, and what you see here is results from a number of companies, but they are anonymous. So I can't see that this one is Statoil and this one is BP and this one is ExxonMobil. I just see that this is company GT or CQ or whatever, and these are changed from year to year. So you can't really say that. You can't see from year to year also how different companies developed. But each company is given their own identifier. So when I was in Statoil, I knew what was our results, and I can see whether we were on par with the industry, if we were doing badly, or if we were doing well. Now, what we did then in Statoil was that we contacted a number of other companies like Total, like ExxonMobil, like BP, like Shell, and we said, we are this and this company. We gave them our identifier. Can you share with us your identifier? And they did. And then we got better. Then we could see more, because then we knew that, okay, with regard to Shell, we were better or worse. And if we were worse, then we could talk to Shell and say, how can we learn from what you are doing? This is very, very useful thing to do. Next, please. Okay, this is my last slide. Monitoring and reviewing of process safety performance is very important. IOGP has, during the last 8 years, developed their view on managing process safety. Integrity monitoring must be fact-based rather than opinion-based, and it includes what you see listed below here. Key performance indicators, leading and lagging. The tier 1s and tier 2s I just referred to, they are lagging. But there is a report again by the Process Safety Subcommittee talking about leading indicators and how to utilize that concept. Barrier performance verification is important, i.e. audit findings. Benchmarking and lessons learned from external events, so based on statistics that I've just exemplified for you. Incident and accident investigations and risk analysis. All of these are important parts that you can use for integrity monitoring, which will help you in improving process safety. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. Dr. Jain Rohr, it was a very, very interesting, comprehensive presentation where you give a lot of examples as to how process safety can be monitored. And also you rightly said, as Dr. Gupta also emphasized, that it has to be a top-down approach, because the top management has to drive down, it has to be imbibed in the culture of the company for process safety. And the KPIs which you discussed were extremely important because there have to be key performance indicators for that. Then what are the barriers? And you also emphasized on one of the very important thing, like taking the interview or personal interview of the people who had seen that accident occurred in their factories or areas. Thank you very much indeed for your this very important presentation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have some questions. We have some questions from our participants. First, I will, there's a question from Mr. Anil Sood, who is also our very distinguished member of Infrastructure Committee. And Mr. Anil Sood is an environmentalist, and he works a lot on environment. So, Mr. Anil Sood, you have a question for Dr. J.P. Gupta. Can you please unmute Mr. Anil Sood? Mr. Sood? Sood sir, please speak. You are unmuted now. Mr. Anil Sood?
No, are you calling me?
Mr. Anil Sood. Mr. Anil
No.
Sood.
No, I am Anil Kumar.
No, Mr. Anil Sood, he had just sent a chat box. Mr. Anil Sood, are you there?
No.
I think he doesn't seem to be there. Mr. Anil Kumar, you have a question?
No, thank you.
Okay, fine. Then we have Mr. Kuldeep Mattu. Mr. Kuldeep Mattu. Can you unmute Mr. Kuldeep Mattu? Yes.
Yeah, I have not given any question.
You have raised your hand, Mr. Mattu.
No. That's by chance. That's by chance.
Oh, that is by chance. Okay, fine. There's a question from in a chat box. There are some questions from some participants. I'll read it for the benefit of. So, Mr. Rajendra Bedi writes a lot of manuals and risk management studies documented, but when an accident, explosion, fire takes place at night, the night managers and workforce find it beyond them. They are not trained on EPR. They cannot evaluate injured and many lives are lost. He writes that there is need of surprise EPR systems to test whether the company can handle accidents or not. So whether the company can handle the accidents or not, he says that there should be some surprise EPR systems or some manuals, some guidelines, which Dr. Gupta also emphasized on having guidelines. Even the government is also preparing some guidelines. I think anyone can throw some light on it. Dr. Jain, would you like to throw light on this?
Yeah, I think emergency preparedness is what he's talking about.
Yes.
And at least in my country, the regulatory authorities, they require companies. Now I'm basically talking about oil and gas industry because we don't have a big chemical industry in Norway, but we have a big oil and gas. And the regulatory authorities, they require the companies to have a set of predefined accident types that I think there are 22 different ones, where they have to, first of all, they have to report yearly on incidents there, and then they also have to train on how to manage these on a regular basis. All companies have to do that. So I think that is the case here also. You need to have an emergency response analysis, and then you need to have an emergency response plan, and you have to have the required training. And as Dr. Gupta also highlighted, training can take many facets. One of them is physical, actual training, and another one is virtual reality training. Both should be looked into.
Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Umesh Kulshrestha has a question for Dr. Gupta. Who should find the Center of Excellence? Who should fund the Center of Excellence, and which organization do you recommend for its accreditation?
Umesh, industries and the government has to finance it, because in every country, the research takes place in industry, in universities, and universities are funded by industries. So therefore, Center of Excellence after a few years will become a self-supporting, because the activities of Center of Excellence are many, and there are many verticals, and these verticals generate a lot of funds in providing consultancy services to the, like I mentioned, that starting from the banks to the companies, like all the industries in our country needs safety audit, authentic safety audit, what they have to do, how safe is their plant, what thing they have to do. And therefore, these kind of activities are given to the Center of Excellence, and these Center of Excellence can perform and can generate a lot of funds.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. So now Mr. Parmatalu writes to Dr. Bakes for a wonderful presentation that you have given. He writes and he says, what is the minimum concentration of chlorine lead to explode in the site you have shown in your presentation?
Chlorine is an oxidizer, like oxygen. It's not like reactant like methane or propane, or so you actually would need to mix it with another reactant to get it to oxidize, or to burn. So this is more related to spreading of toxic gases.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dan. Then
I think Dr. Mehta, Mr. Sood is there.
Oh, Mr. Sood, you are here now. Mr. Sood, yes, you can. Mr. Sood is a very distinguished environmentalist who has been working with the National Green Tribunal also by profession. He is an advocate, also an activist. Mr. Sood, you wanted to ask some question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, Center of the idea mooted by Dr. Gupta is very nice and very good. There are existing Center of Excellence set up by universities and various colleges also, which can be strengthened further, so as to introduce the area of accident investigation. Now, when we look at our manuals, various industries have got the manuals, and I'm sure those manuals are very effective, because I have seen the manual in oil industry, I have seen the road manual, I have seen some manuals in IT industry also. What the main issue is, if I go to second slide of Dr. Gupta, that environmental cost and accidents, quite a few accidents are still not known, and in quite a few cases, the ministry itself changes the law. So that practice needs to be stopped. Dr. Gupta, can you hear me?
Yeah, I am hearing you.
Because very recently, after 9 years of protracted litigation, the noise norms were refixed. Now, I am talking of environmental cost and health cost. Now, once those norms were refixed, plus 10% variation was added, that means there is no variation in the norms. A few days back, I got a response from Ministry of Environment and Forest that they do not assess the gaseous emissions from aircrafts when the ministry has manual for the last 10 years.
Yeah,
So
Mr. Sood, you know, this particular topic has to be related to process safety.
No, process safety, it is coming out of process. It's flowing out of the process of aviation. Aviation itself is an industry.
Anilji, let me interact at this point. What point you have raised, they are all very pertinent. There is no doubt about it. And like in environment, in notification, there are many lacunas. Similarly, in process safety, there are many lacunas which we are trying to fill in.
Yeah.
So therefore, anything you want to bring to the notice of the government, either through me or directly.
No, we'll come through you only, sir.
No, sir. I'm telling you, we will be glad, because at the end of the day, nothing is complete. And we are all working to make it a safer environment and a good environment, a sustainable environment where we can all work together. And I am very happy that you have flagged those issues which are being flagged by many, and definitely we will give attention to the aviation noise and other areas which you will bring to our notice. And I do appreciate all good things should be brought in, and our country should be at par with respect to all the guidelines and regulations as per the best international practices. And these can be done, these can be achieved. Therefore, my entire presentation in process safety, I didn't pinpoint, but I talked about how to create the basic ecosystem, or as a matter of fact, to change the mindset, or as a matter of fact, to create the importance of process safety as a second nature for everyone, from top to bottom. And not only that, it's not in industry, even in your own homes.
Yes.
Sorry, Anilji, I tell you, there is a construction going on in front of my house, and you will be surprised, all the people with a naked wire, just they join it with no plug, and they put it in the pin and to draw the electricity. And you can well imagine in the rainy season, when they take out the wire and they put it in. I'm giving a small example. And what happened, you will be surprised. I went to the market, I bought the plug, and I brought the electrician, fitted all of them free of cost to them. Because for me, I appreciated the safety, and maybe by doing my small act, they may also follow. So therefore, let's join hand together.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
मैं तो सर आपको बतलाता हूँ, जो भी आप कह रहे हैं बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, बहुत पर्टिनेंट है. ये एक तरीके से यज्ञ है, उसके अंदर जितनी अपन आहुति डालते हैं, it is good for all of us now and for the coming generation.
सर, आपकी बहुत हेल्प चाहिए दो चीजों में, कि ये जो इनके मैनुअल है ना, हमारे मैनुअल बहुत अच्छे बने हुए हैं इंडस्ट्री में. ऑयल इंडस्ट्री का मैनुअल बहुत अच्छा है, हमारे रोड सेफ्टी के मैनुअल बहुत अच्छे हैं, हमारे इसके कंस्ट्रक्शन का मैनुअल बहुत अच्छा है. somehow these are not being enforced.
बिल्कुल ठीक है सर. आपने देखा होगा मेरे एक्शन प्लान में मैंने एक पॉइंट लिखा है कि रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटी शुड बी मेड अकाउंटेबल. My each and every word, sentences, what I have presented, my vision for the country, there I have written it. I absolutely agree with you.
That's the major point which is missing, and all these authorities, supervisory, regulatory, they wash off their hands by simply saying this was not done, this was not done. Now, Vizag has had recently 3 accidents.
Sood Saab, बहुत बढ़िया. You raised very. In fact, you can offline also talk to Dr. Gupta. He is very helpful. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Can I say something, sir?
There's one last question we have for Dr. Jain. Mr. Ravinder writes, do you possess data of effect of chemical toxins, methane, ferrous or non-ferrous ions on wildlife of India? Particularly large-scale mortality has been seen in amphibians, effect of fly ash on bird and bats, etc. So please elaborate, he writes. If you have Dr. Jain, if you can answer this.
Oh, that was a difficult one.
Okay.
I must admit that I really don't have any knowledge or competence in this particular area. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now I request Dr. J.S. Sharma, co-chairman of our Environment Committee, to give the formal vote of thanks to our very distinguished panelists and participants as well.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjit Mehta. I am audible?
Yes, yes.
So first let me answer some of the queries of the Mr. Anil Sood.
Yes.
For noise generated from the aircrafts is controlled by the International Civil Aviation Norms. In India, it is controlled by the air pollution, the airport authorities and GMR. They monitor it. They formulated another company like Dial. They are having some certain monitoring stations and all that. If anything comes, respective Delhi DPCC has the action under EPA Act. That is the provision in place. So this is one thing. Second, I'm coming to the formal to propose vote of thanks to Dr. J.P. Gupta, Dr. Jain Roar of Jackson, Executive Vice President, and Chairman, Environment Committee, PhD Chambers, and Dr. Ranjit Mehta, who is coordinating all these activities for the industries in India. So I'm extending my vote of thanks for sharing their valuable times and the advice, like creation of Center of Excellence is a novel idea. It is a campaign being run by the PhD Chamber, by the Environment Committee, by the Jackson together for creating a process safety ecosystem in India to prevent the accidents. So this is one, and I am very delighted to see the video of chlorine dispersion by the Dr. Jain, and this kind of technology and dispersion for in verticals, it is very important, especially when the wind speed is very low. So I am very much thankful and for the insight given through the webinar on the process safety. I am also thankful to the Mr. Podar and Mr. Rastogi for their presence as my co-chairman to this committee, and also thankful to the Madam Kanchan and Devika Sharma for their help and all that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Dr. Mehta.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So it's okay. Goodbye.
Thank you, Dr. Rohr. Thank you.
Dr. Mehta, you are always very kind. And Kanchan,
Thank you
very
everybody.
much for your
Thank you.
excellent arrangement.
Thank you, sir.